Prototyping methods, part 1. Now that we know the what and the why of prototyping, let's talk about how we actually do it. I'm going to take you through the main prototyping methods, and while it's by no means a complete list of all possible ways of prototyping you could imagine, it'll cover off what you need to know in order to start getting data over opinion. We're going to start with the first three methods: the fake door, the facade, and the Mechanical Turk. The first method is the fake door method. Now, the fake door is when you don't have an existing product or service, but you want to pretend that you have one in order to measure what people do versus what they say. And this is the only method where we don't actually have a product or service that exists. So you need to think hard about how you use this, where you use it, and the ethics and legality of using it. But there are some circumstances where you're able to go and test this with customers. It's a great way to move you from sitting around a table discussing an idea to actually testing it, because you get very quick data. And you actually get the first failure, which is really important, because often what you imagined you want to put in front of the customer, which is your opinions, is quite different from what works in reality when you get real data. So imagine you're a massive fan of Justin Bieber, and you want to get some Justin Bieber love out into the world. How would you do it? Well, in your opinion, the world needs a Justin Bieber doll. So the standard way to go about this is that you would spend a lot of time figuring out what this doll looks like. You'd go out and design it, get it manufactured, get a bunch of them shipped to your house and stack them in every nook and cranny, and then go out and try and sell them. And only then figure out whether people actually wanted them or not. And lo and behold, no one wants one. So you try harder and harder to sell them and never believe that nobody wants one. And you get convinced that you're just selling it wrong. But maybe it was a terrible idea in the first place. And now you're stuck with a house full of Justin Bieber dolls. Now that's a very expensive, slow way to test. One fast, cheap prototyping way to do this is to use the fake door method. To do this, you mock up a fake web page with an image of the doll and the pricing and a call to action to buy one. What you're looking for is the minimum amount of time, effort and money required to get something believable in front of your customers as quickly as possible. And normally, this can happen in a few hours, rather than the months it takes the traditional way. So you mock up your justinbieberdoll.com and launch it and get it in front of 100 people. Now at this stage, you're not aiming for statistical significance. What you're trying to do is create a bias towards action, and you're trying to measure the best case scenario. You're asking, can we even get anyone interested? Because if you can't get it to work in the best case scenario, it's probably time to go back to the drawing board. And we discover this by watching what customers do when presented with a product. In this case, the best case scenario is you want to run some Google ads, get people to go to the site, and gauge what we call the initial level of interest, meaning how many people are seeing the site versus how many people are clicking the buy button. So we're interested in how many people view the offer versus how many people take action. And that's the piece of data we're looking for at this point, because no matter what your product or service is, you always want people to engage with it directly. So that might look really simple, but in the background there's a lot of stuff going on. To get to this point, we've used a lean canvas to figure out the problem, the unique value proposition and the messaging and the branding, and thought through how to get people to engage with this proposition. The beauty of the fake door method is that you can isolate what you need to test and then drive data to your proposition so that you can get targeted specific information quickly and cheaply. The facade method. The next method is the facade. And the facade is when you have a limited amount of your product or service and you want to test something else about it, like scale or deliverability. So an example of this is Zappos, which was a shoe brand started in 1999 that sold to Amazon in 2009 for $1.2 billion. And at that time, selling shoes online seemed insane. Like any clothing item, you just couldn't do it. It didn't make any sense. What Zappos did is that they had limited stock of shoes and they ran a campaign and they were trying to test, are we able to sell shoes online at scale? And how can we quickly learn what the blockers and barriers are to doing that? So they designed a website and said, great, what's the best case scenario? Yeah, the best case scenario has been able to say to our customers, we will get you whatever shoes you want. Send us a picture of the shoes and where you bought them. You then mail them a picture and they go, great. They literally send someone down the road, buy the shoes, put them in a box, rebrand them as Zappos, and mail them off to you. Now shoes are tricky to sell because they have to fit really well, the colors matter, and people are picky. So the next issue that comes up with is, how do you do returns? So they said, okay, we'd offer 365 days free returns, which we pay for, which is clearly not sustainable as a business model. But it takes the barrier away to learn, will people buy these shoes online? Which was the hypothesis that they were trying to answer. That was the data they needed. Once again, the best case scenario is not necessarily what you'll implement as your ongoing business model. So they ran this experiment for a while and they sent the shoes out. The other thing that they're very famous for, that they did really well, was that they thought a bit laterally and said to each call center agent, you have a small budget to solve customers' problems in any way. So if you phoned the call center and you weren't happy with the shoes, they'd go, okay, they're not necessarily shoes in the right shade of blue. Can we send you a pizza to make amends, or something like that? And customers would probably go, yep, that's good, and keep the shoes. So they're really creative around how they solve the problems, but all the while staying true to the mission of answering the question, and the hypothesis is, can we sell shoes online at scale? And they answered that question and stopped the experiment, the prototype, in order to build something more permanent, which they could now confidently invest in because they had the data they needed to move forward knowing it would work. The facade element of this was that they pretended to have all the shoes in the universe available, but in reality, they only had 100 pairs, for example. Another example of this from the master of prototyping is our friend Elon over at Tesla. This was absolutely a facade in my opinion, the Tesla Model 3. Picture this. It's April the 1st, 2016. Elon comes onto a live stream and he says, okay, once again, Silicon Valley, we've got this magical new car that's going to solve all your problems. You can't touch it, you can't drive it. The specs may or may not be exactly as I say now, and it's going to cost roughly $35,000 to $50,000. We may or may not be making it over the next 2 years. All you can do is see this one car that we have on the stage behind me on the live stream. Would you like one? Now, any rational human would say, nope, I don't think so. But what happened was 325,000 people put down a $1,000 deposit and said, yes, we would absolutely like one. That is completely a facade. I guarantee you, if no one put deposits down, they would have pulled the plug on their product. That's an example of the facade method. The key here is you're thinking clearly about what data you need, what you're trying to measure. You're asking, what data will prove that this is something worth doing? And you're getting people to take action and put skin in the game. The Mechanical Turk. The next prototyping method is the Mechanical Turk. This is when you use a human to execute a task and fulfill a promise to a customer at a small scale. The first 100 people, for example. So instead of actually rushing off and building technology or building systems or thinking about how we can make one, we don't ever actually make one. Instead, we're going to run experiments and use a human to simulate new technology or systems so that we can get the data first before we make something. And we use this a lot in enterprises where the default reaction is, let's go and make one and see if customers want it. We're trying to intercept that and not have to think about how we do it and scale and all those complexities. So we use a human to simulate what a potential solution could look like. I'll give you some practical examples. In 2014, Facebook launched AI chatbots, and suddenly everyone started coming to us saying, we have to have a chatbot. And wanting something just because the technology exists is a really bad reason to have it and to make one. So once again, the framing question becomes, does this new solution solve customers' problems 10 times better than the way it's currently being solved by reducing friction and dramatically improving the experience? That is always the filter. In this case, the answer was probably not. So I was working with a company and there was this desire to create a chatbot. One way to do this would be to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to roll it out and market it and make it scalable. But at this point, we're just guessing what customers want based on our opinion internally of the chatbot being a cool piece of tech. Instead, we prototyped it in just 4 days. On a Thursday, we set up a fake Facebook chatbot. Friday, we set up a spreadsheet with questions and answers, and we invited 100 customers to use this potential chatbot the next day. We used a guy called Josh, so we called the Josh bot internally. Saturday morning, Josh pretended to be the bot and answered the customers' questions. And luckily we did that, because 8 minutes later, we failed. We were completely wrong. We'd missed the boat completely. All of our clever assumptions were wrong. Everything that all the clever people had thought for 6 months were wrong. So the Mechanical Turk component was Josh doing this. So the Mechanical Turk component was Josh executing on this instead of us spending that $500,000 building something. In 4 days and 8 minutes, we saved that $500,000. Why? Because if we'd raced ahead and launched it based on our assumptions, 8 minutes after launch, we would have failed anyway. So we're trying to accelerate the process of failure to be able to learn very quickly. And there are many, many ways to get a human to simulate the automation piece. So always consider the Mechanical Turk when running an experiment. To recap, in this lesson we covered the fake door method, where you create a pretend product or service in order to test customer interest. The facade method, which you use to test initial interest in a product that is not yet broadly available, and often to test scalability. And the Mechanical Turk method, where you use a human to simulate technology in order to see if customers will use it before you build it. All of these methods are about getting your first pieces of data quickly and cheaply, because then you can iterate. You don't only run one prototype experiment, you run them over and over and over to figure out what customers really want. And in the next lesson, we'll cover 4 more prototyping methods, which you can use for different purposes.